All right, so I dropped my prediction for the main event of UFC 300, and now I'm just going to really quickly run through the rest of the card and drop my semi well informed slash researched predictions for the rest of the fights. So, starting off with Davidson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, we'll just really quickly run down kind of their more recent fights and give a general idea of where they are. So Cody Garbrandt, he's obviously on the older side. He's slowing down a bit. He doesn't have the cardio that he once had, notably slowing down dramatically against Trevin Jones and losing that third round, kind of barely surviving round number 3 after looking very good in rounds 1 and 2. And then in round 1 against Brian Kelleher, he was able to knock him out. So good job for Cody Garbrandt. And he's fighting against Davidson Figueiredo, who has moved up from flyweight to bantamweight. After losing his title to Moreno, he comes and fights Rob Font. That was a great fight for Figueiredo. He kind of did what Corey Sandhagen did to Font. He just wrestled him and then was able to also outstrike him. I think that Davidson Figueiredo can do a pretty similar game plan to Cody Garbrandt that he employed against Font. I think that Garbrandt doesn't really have the required wrestling to beat up on Figueiredo with it. And I also think that Garbrandt's striking, where he relies on speed and just quick power shots, isn't going to match up well against Figueiredo's kind of matador style of just good head movement and counter striking. So ultimately, I'm going to pick Figueiredo either by knockout or decision. And if I'm making predictions and or betting, if I'm kind of torn between something, I'm usually going to hedge towards just doing an emotional bet, where it would be like or I'd be doing an emotional hedge. So if I want to see a knockout, which I usually do, but I think that a knockout is kind of equally likely as a decision, I'll predict decision. But Garbrandt has not the greatest chin, so there is a chance that Figueiredo can knock him out. However, Garbrandt has survived rounds. He has survived fights against Rob Font, Trevin Jones, Brian Kelleher. He's not totally crazy like he was in the Pedro Munoz and this whole TJ Dillashaw era, where he's just a string of knockouts. Anyway, we got to go back quicker on these. So Bobby Green versus Jim Miller up next. We kind of know where these two guys are at in their careers. Jim Miller didn't look great in his last fight against Benitez. He kind of just gutted out a victory. He was kind of getting really hurt there. So I think I'm going to take Bobby Green. And I think I'm going to take Bobby Green actually finishing Jim Miller, just catching him with some big shots and hurting him to the point where the referee's going to have to step in and protect Jim Miller. I'm going to predict Bobby Green probably a second round TKO. Then we have Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. Now, I know Jessica Andrade did bounce back in a big way against Mackenzie Dern, just kind of making her look amateurish. Marina Rodriguez has lost to some big punchers, such as Priscilla Cachoeira and Amanda Lemos. However, those are both better strikers than Jessica Andrade, and I'm picking Marina Rodriguez by decision. I think she's just going to outpoint Jessica Andrade. I think Andrade has really lost a step. I mean, look at the people that she beat in 2023. She beat Lauren Murphy and she beat Mackenzie Dern. Not exactly the best of the best at strawweight. Now we have Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano was someone I was pretty high on in his fight because, he did do pretty good stuff. So against RDA, he got he got taken to hell, but he was coming on. He kind of beat up RDA in the 5th round, even though he still got his ass handed to him. But he looked good. I was expecting big things. And then he looked really good against Brad Riddell, Adesanya's teammate. He kind of retired Brad Riddell from MMA, at least for a while, just knocking him down and then choking him out in the 1st round. So that was extremely impressive. And then he fought Drew Dober, and he barely survived that fight. I don't know if he was sick or he was off, but Dober was landing bombs on him, and he just won that by the skin of his teeth by getting takedowns, just desperation takedowns. He wasn't even really able to do anything with them. He did throw some ground and pound, but it wasn't anything that crazy. And that really didn't impress me too much about that. Jalen Turner, on the other hand, has looked pretty good against grapplers. And even when he's lost his fights, such as Dan Hooker and Mateus Gamrot, he's looked good in those. So it's like you pick a guy who has a ton of wins and 2 losses, and in the losses he's looked good, or you pick a guy who has a ton of wins and 2 losses, and in the wins he looks bad, and in the losses he looks bad. I'm going with Jalen Turner. I think he can outstrike Moicano. I think that he's demonstrated an ability to resist grappling that Moicano doesn't seem to be able to overcome with his current skill set. I think that Turner is probably going to knock out Renato Moicano, and I'm just going to predict round number 1. Sadiq Youssef versus Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez is awesome. When he came in against Movzar and kind of made Movzar look like a fool, I'm like, wow, Movzar's not good. And then he triangle armbars Gavin Tucker in round 1, which a lot of people thought Gavin Tucker was going to beat Diego Lopez. And then he knocks out Pat Sabatini in round 1. And I'm like, okay, Diego Lopez is the real deal. I think I judged Movzar a little harshly for that performance. However, he did get hit against Pat Sabatini, and he throws wild shots. And because of this wildness on the feet, I am picking Sadiq Youssef. Even though Sadiq Youssef just kind of shit the bed against Edson Barbosa, he looked amazing in that first round. And I don't think someone as crazy as Diego Lopez is going to get Sadiq Youssef off his game. I mean, look at the guys he's beaten up against. Alex Caceres and Don Shyness. Not 100% sure about him, but I mean, he's lost to some of the best strikers in the sport, Arnold Allen and Edson Barbosa. I think that Sadiq Youssef has good enough wrestling to disengage from any kind of ground scenarios that Diego Lopez can throw at him. I don't think he's going to be dumb enough to follow Lopez to the ground. And I think that Sadiq Youssef's striking is going to just be better than Diego Lopez's striking. Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. Holm has looked extremely old in her last couple of performances, kind of just trying to hold her opponents up against the wall. That's not going to work against Kayla Harrison. Even if Holm tries to change up her game plan and just strike with Kayla Harrison at a distance, I don't think it's going to really be enough. I think that Kayla Harrison's going to eventually get a takedown on Holm, probably like a body lock judo trip, and from there, she's been talking about elbows, but I think she'll probably ground and pound her, and then for some reason I'm just envisioning like a Kimura. So I think we're gonna get a round 2 submission out of Kayla Harrison over Holm, but don't be surprised about a TKO or a decision win for Kayla Harrison. Oh, and by method for Sadiq Youssef, I am picking by decision. I think that he just defends Lopez's takedowns, outstrikes him on the feet, wins all 3 rounds. Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. This one I'm not 100% sure on. Like, if you're betting on any of these fights, I probably wouldn't bet on Aljo versus Kattar. I think that's pretty close. I'm leaning towards Aljamain Sterling simply because he's really impressed me with his grappling abilities before, namely against Cejudo, where he's just so sticky on Cejudo and he was able to just wear on him. And I think he can do a similar style attack to Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar struggled to get Josh Emmett off of him, getting like losing minutes of that fight by just Josh Emmett hugging onto him. Aljo can do the same thing. Kattar also doesn't have the most powerful punches in the world, especially at featherweight. I think Aljo's awkwardness is going to actually cause Calvin some problems. And I think he's just going to be able to hold on to those legs. This is only a 3-round fight. This is perfect for Aljamain Sterling. He's kind of famous for dropping off in cardio for the last couple of rounds against those Petr Yan fights. So this is great for Aljo. I think he can win. I think he can easily win 2 out of the 3 rounds with his grappling. So my prediction for this fight is going to be Aljamain, and I think he's going to do it by a decision. Now we have Yuri Prasco versus Alexander Rockit. This is going to be an interesting fight. I think that Yuri Prasco is going to knock out Alexander Rockit. Rockit has kind of been unimpressive in his striking. Yeah, he has a head kick knockout over Jimmy Manuwa, but he didn't even strike against Anthony Smith. He just took him down. He didn't even strike against Jan Blachowicz. He just tried to take Jan down and ended up getting outstruck by Jan Blachowicz. I think that Yuri Prasco is just going to pick up on the weaknesses of Alexander Rockic's striking and find a way to knock him out. And I'm just predicting a round 1 knockout, although I can definitely see a round 2 knockout for Yuri, since that's kind of when he does pick up the pace on his opponents. Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. Bo Nickal is extremely overrated, and I love the fact that he's getting booed, even though I think it's for a stupid reason. Okay, please, if you're watching this video and you care about the fact that Bo Nickal is fighting at a later chronology than some of these other fighters, just take a minute and write down why. I need you to reflect on why you care, and then tell me in the comment section below. If you can tell me why you care, that's great. I love the fact that you're self-reflective. Bo Nickal is extremely overrated. His striking's bad. His wrestling has been underwhelming. That being said, Cody Brundage isn't that great either. Like, he's a meathead, but a meathead without a great chin, which is not a very good combination. I think Bo Nickal can knock him out, same as Val Woodburn. I heard someone say that Bo Nickal's been fighting a slow increase in the level of his opponents. I 100% disagree with that. Out of the 3 UFC opponents he's been booked against, I think Val Woodburn is the worst. I think Cody Brundage is probably the second worst, and Jamie Pickett is the best of those 3. Jamie Pickett's actually a good fighter. I do think that Jamie Pickett got robbed in that fight against Bo Nickal. Bo Nickal clearly hit him with a knee to the groin, and he was able to get the takedown from there. And then Pickett was just in anguish as he was getting his neck yanked on by Bo Nickal. But Bo Nickal is good wrestling. He has good submissions. I think he can out-wrestle Brundage. I also think he can knock him out, which is what my prediction is going to be. And I'm going with a round 1 knockout for Bo Nickal. Then we have Charles Olivera versus Arman Tsarukyan. This is going to be a great fight. I've already broken down Arman Tsarukyan versus the top 3 of the division, which was Charles, Gaethje, and Poirier. And surprise, surprise, those are still the top 3 of the division, although maybe that will change after this Saturday. Charles Olivera has great jiu-jitsu. He has great striking. Arman Tsarukyan has very good wrestling. He has decent striking. I'm not going to say great, even though he has some knockouts. If Arman Tsarukyan takes Charles Olivera down, he's going to go for ground and pound. Charles Olivera has really been working on using his jiu-jitsu to get up from these positions. Tsarukyan needs to smush Olivera up against the cage if he doesn't want to be submitted, or at least be in a dangerous enough situation where he needs to bail out from the top position. Charles Olivera has been, I think he's clearly been working on getting up from bottom against these wrestlers. He was able to sweep Islam. He was able to sweep Dariush. Those are both great wrestlers. That's great experience for fighting someone like Arman Tsarukyan. If Arman can pin Charles Olivera up against the cage, similar to what Chandler did and what Islam did at the end of round 1, actually for both Chandler and Islam is at the end of round 1, that they were smushing Charles up against the cage, then he can win rounds that way. That worked for Chandler and it worked for Islam. However, every round starts on the feet, and every takedown usually will end up in the middle of the mat, at least at some point. So, is Charles Oliveira going to be able to deal enough damage or throw up enough submissions to get back up to his feet? Because I don't think he's going to catch Arman in anything. But I do think that his submissions are going to be enough to get back up, and I think that his striking is just better than Arman's striking. Arman will follow Charles down to the ground when he has him hurt, and I think he could hurt Charles Oliveira. I don't think he will, though. One of Arman's favorite strikes is his kicks. I just don't see that working well against Charles. I think Charles is going to counter that with just one of his left straights or a left hook. And I think he's going to wobble Arman, and I think he's going to finish him in the third with a knockout. So I'm picking Charles Oliveira by a round 3 knockout. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. This fight, I really don't want to make a prediction for because I just want to enjoy it. So I'm just going to keep this extremely brief. Max Holloway has a ton of good output, cardio, durability, just all of the stats that you can think of. He just really doesn't have too much power. I mean, he threw everything into that shot against Korean Zombie, and he still didn't really knock him out cold. It hit flush, and he dropped him, and he was done. Wasn't out cold. Justin Gaethje puts guys out cold. There is a huge power discrepancy here. Justin Gaethje has a great chin. We have seen him get hurt against guys that have moved up from featherweight before, namely Charles Oliveira. Justin Gaethje definitely gets hurt, but it's against some of the hardest punchers in the division. Max Holloway is not one of the hardest punchers at lightweight. I don't see him really hurting Justin Gaethje that much. I think takedowns are live for both of these guys. I think that we actually will see a few takedowns between the two of them. This is a 5-round fight. I think this fight's going to go to decision. I don't really see either guy finishing each other. And ultimately, I think Justin Gaethje is going to get the nod because he is going to be landing the bigger, harder punches in the eyes of the judges. So I'm going with Gaethje by decision. Then we have Jang Wei versus Yan Xan. These are both good fighters. Zhang Wei has the advantage in wrestling. I think clearly she's one of the best women wrestlers in the UFC. Yan Xan has good striking, so does Zhang Wei. You can say they're comparable. There's still just a huge discrepancy in wrestling for Zhang Wei. So I'm going to pick her, and I'm going to pick her by a round 3 submission. I think she's just going to outwork her, take her down for those first 2 rounds, submit her in the third. That brings us to the main event. Already broke that down. I'm picking Alex Pereira by a round 3 knockout. Go watch that breakdown if you have missed it. One thing that I wanted to talk about, I know that some of the big favorites on this card have been talked about a lot. Kayla Harrison at minus 450, Bo Nickel at minus 2,000, and Zhang Wei at minus 485. I would say out of all 3 of these, the person with the least likelihood of getting upset is Kayla Harrison, just because I think Holly Holm is so old that she's just so inoffensive in everything that she does. You do not have to worry about what Kayla Harrison does not have to worry about anything that's coming back at her. If she loses this, it would be reminiscent of Amanda Nunes losing to Juliana Pena, where Nunes kind of just implodes because she doesn't know what to do. All of her cardio just dissipates from her body, and she just panics. It'd have to be something like that, where it's coming from inside you. The loss is being called from within the house. And then the second most likelihood of losing is Bo Nickel. It's kind of funny, like Cody Brundage was in a triangle in against his last opponent, and he slam KO'd him. That's not going to happen against Bo Nickel, but it would be hilarious if it did. But Bo Nickel is a better wrestler than Zachary Reese. He's going to hook the leg. Even if he gets Cody Brundage in a triangle in that exact same position, he's going to hook the leg. He's not going to let Cody Brundage pick him up. Even if he does pick him up, he's going to disengage from the triangle and not get slammed on his head. He's too good of a wrestler for that. Cody Brundage also doesn't have the greatest striking, so Bo Nickal's is not really in danger of getting knocked out. Bo Nickal's also extremely cautious on the feet. He's not going to get hit by anything from Cody Brundage. And then the biggest favorite that has the highest likelihood of losing their belt is Jang Wei. I think that Yan Xan is a very good fighter. She has good power in her hands, good striking techniques. If she gets Zhang Wei in a situation where the wrestling's not working and she's starting to panic, I can see Yan Xan picking up a decision win, kind of just bringing it into a brawl reminiscent of Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Zhang Wei. But I know I predicted a lot of decisions on this card, but I think all of these fights have the potential to be extremely entertaining. And with $300,000 on the line in just bonus, in a single bonus alone, so you can pick up performance of the night bonus and fight of the night bonus and make $600K just in your fight by yourself. That might change a way that a lot of these fighters are competing. So that will be super interesting to see. And actually, if that's the case, would any of these predictions change? I don't think so. Maybe Jim Miller would change because he'd be way more aggressive against Bobby Green and less likely to just go for takedowns, which Green can defend. Yeah, I don't think any of my predictions would change, but still, it will be interesting to see what happens. And I think all of these fights are main event worthy. And I'm doing a main event challenge to myself where I predict the main event of every UFC event of the year of 2024. And so far we have 10 main events. And I actually do want to go through this and then we'll take a look at the odds. So I have my predictions listed here. These are my main events so far. And I noticed that I heard the Weasel talking about how this guy Scarlet King started ranking a bunch of random accounts. I guess these are people that draw predictions. And the highest one is 71%. I don't know what he's really counting, if it's 71% is the odds. But I'm doing pretty well. I feel like Moreno versus Royval, I still maintain that Moreno should have won that decision, but he lost. And then I've miscalled 2 heavyweight fights. So, all in all, I'm doing pretty good. Haven't missed a pay-per-view yet this year. Pereira versus Hill, I am fairly confident in Pereira. Fairly confident in him. That's going to be an interesting one. Yep. I'm picking Pereira. Let's take a look at the odds really quick. Davis Figueiredo's a minus 330 favorite. I wouldn't be that confident in him just because I can see the speed of Cody Garbrandt causing him some problems. I would probably rate him like a minus 200 if I was handicapping this. Jim Miller's a plus 146 underdog. The fact that Bobby Green got knocked out in his last fight is probably a reason why this is closer than it is. But again, I would rate Bobby Green maybe like a minus 250 against Jim Miller. Jessica Andrade is minus 142 against Marina Rodriguez. I think that this is money. I think I'm actually going to bet on Marina here. She's lost to power punchers before, but those punchers are A, younger, B, technically better than Jessica Andrade. I think that this is not going to be a pretty fight for Andrade. Jalen Turner against Renato Moicano, minus 242. Yep, that's about accurate. Sadiq Youssef at plus 117 against Diego Lopez. I think these odds should be reversed. Sadiq is just the more consistent fighter than Lopez. Lopez fights way too crazy to be a favorite against someone as consistent as Sadiq. Holm plus 340 against Kayla Harrison. That's probably accurate. In fact, these might be good odds on Kayla Harrison. Calvin Kattar, Aljamain Sterling. This one is a coin toss to me. I would not bet on this either way, although I do just like the storyline of Aljamain Sterling competing. I guess you also need to factor in the age of Kattar and the time off that he's had, so the ring rust. Yuri Prasco versus Alexander Rockit. This is basically a pick'em. That's interesting. The odds of over 2.5 is only plus 119. Bet the under, man. I don't think this fight's going the distance. Bo Nickel at minus 2,000 is crazy. He's not funny or interesting at all, and his YouTube channel is garbage, man. It's kind of funny. Like, I know he's not interesting at all, but it is kind of funny to just see how garbage he is. The garbage content he's putting out. And I did love seeing him get booed. that brought a smile to my face. Charles Olivera plus 175 against Arman Yukan minus 220. I don't know why this is the case. I mean, Charles Oliveira's done great against wrestlers. He's lost to one wrestler, and that's Islam Makhachev. So this is surprising to me because I feel like Charles's jiu-jitsu trumps Arman's wrestling, and his striking is just better than Arman's. This might surprise a lot of people too. This is an interesting one. The odds are getting closer and closer. I thought Gaethje was going to be a heavy favorite here. But no, Max has done a good job convincing people. This is a coin toss. Wow. I think I might bet on Justin Gaethje, not only because I would rate Justin Gaethje as a minus 200 favorite. I think that would be realistic. Just because of his 5-round, he's just so good, man. He's good at 5-round fights. I can see him fighting the smartest he's ever fought before, just standing behind the jab, waiting, just destroying Max Holloway's legs with his kicks. I didn't even talk about that. I mean, Max Holloway can get his legs completely kicked off. That's what happened against Volkanovski. That's how Volkanovski won the belt against Max Holloway. Yeah, I think I'm going to bet on this not only because of the good odds, but also an emotional hedge. I think if Max Holloway wins, that would be an amazing story and something that's supremely interesting happening in both the featherweight and lightweight divisions. Jang Wei versus Yan Xan. Minus 500 for Jang Wei is not worth betting on. I would not bet on that at all. Yan Xan probably has a better chance than plus 360 of beating Zhang Wei. And Alex Pereira at minus 130. I think that's really good odds on him too. I would probably rate him as close to like minus 180, minus 200 over Jamal Hill. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll be watching the fights tomorrow. Let me know if you want me to try streaming the reactions, or like if you'd be interested in that, and we can debate, analyze, draw predictions below, talk about how we're doing in bets. And let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think is the best value on a fighter? What did you think of my predictions? And everyone, enjoy the fights.